Welcome to the ANEW Body Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogrammed Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. And Chantal Donnelly, physical therapist and author of Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. We follow our guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hi, and welcome to the ANEW Body Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I have the privilege of interviewing my co-host, Miss Chantal Donnelly. Say hi to everyone, Chantal.
Well, hello, everyone.
Yes. So I'm going to read a little bit about Chantal. And just for our listeners, we want to get to know us, what we do, what our backgrounds are. That's why we're interviewing each other today. So I'm going to read a little bit about Chantal, and then I'm going to dive into picking her brain.
I have a hard time listening to people read my bio. So if I look weird while you do this, just ignore my face. Okay.
Will do. Chantal Donnelly is a physical therapist and author of the Amazon best-selling book, Settled, How to Find Calm in a Stress-Inducing World. She is also the owner of Body Insight. So hence, ANEW Body Insight. That's how we made our podcast name. We are combining our efforts and our company. She owns Body Insight, a wellness company designed to help people reconnect with their bodies and improve their health. She combines her anatomy and physiology knowledge and experience with nervous system science to help people with chronic pain, overwhelming stress, and stress-related illness. Through videos, workshops, and her book, Chantal teaches body-focused tools for calming the nervous system. She believes that stress fluency can make the world a better place. Chantal, I'm so excited that you're my co-host and that I get to pick your brain today. How are you doing today?
I'm good. We're doing this podcast thing, aren't we? Holy cow.
We're doing this podcast thing, and you are an amazing co-host, but you're also just an amazing physical therapist and have written a wonderful book. I got to be a little bit a part of that, so I'm very proud to be a part of her book, and just like she is a part of mine as well. So Chantal, we're going to go back into history, back through time, as we like to do. I would like to know why you chose to become a physical therapist. Tell us what inspired you.
Oh, yeah, we are going back, aren't we? Yeah. So just like you, I started out as an actress. I was living in LA. I was trying my hand at the acting thing, which basically meant that I was waiting on tables. And I was a terrible waitress and I was kind of miserable. And I started getting jaw pain. And at some point, I saw a doctor who basically said, your jaw pain is related to whatever's going on in your life, your stress, your unhappiness. And as soon as he said it, I broke down crying and I knew he was right. And from that moment on, I was sort of obsessed with this mind-body connection, which at the time was not really talked about. It was a sort of new idea. And I thought, I think I'm going to go and stop acting and go get my degree in psychotherapy. So I wanted to become a therapist, just like you are.
I did not know this.
You did not know this.
I did not know this.
Yes. So I went to Occidental College. Actually, I went to a whole lot of community colleges to get into Occidental, and then I got into Oxy, and my undergrad degree is in psychology.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And then because I was so interested in this body piece, I got a minor in kinesiology. And so I was mostly focused on following the track of talk therapy and becoming a therapist. And I didn't know exactly if it was going to be MFCC or like you get my PsyD, or I didn't really understand where I was going. I just knew I was getting my undergrad in psych and I would figure it out from there. And so while I was at Occidental, I needed to kind of pay the bills and have some money.
Mm.
So I became a massage therapist, and that was my side gig while I was a student. Is at night I would go and I would give people massages. I had a portable table and I would go to their home, 30-pound portable table, mind
Ugh.
you. Um, what I found is that I really enjoyed working on people's bodies. And if somebody had a specific physical injury, I would kind of wake up and be like really excited to work with them versus somebody who just wanted a relaxing massage. And
Mm.
that's when I started to realize that I had this real desire to explore the physical maybe a little bit more than the cognitive stuff. And so I started working as an aide physical therapist. I worked for a chiropractor for a little while. That didn't quite turn out so well. She and I butted heads.
Mm.
And so I ended up at a physical therapy place, and I just kind of fell in love with what they were doing and this
Mhm.
idea of giving people education, the exercises and the tools to then be able to be discharged from physical therapy and have their own healing journey versus a system where people are sort of meant to stay on forever and ever and ever and kind of get dependent on the therapist. And that's not what I was seeing in the physical therapy
Mm.
world, and that really appealed to me. And so I applied to physical therapy school from there. And so I got my undergrad at Occidental, as I mentioned, and then I got my master's in physical therapy at Mount St. Mary's College.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love that it's just born out of just a general desire to help people and then became more and more narrowly focused as you went along. Uh, why do you think after, being in private practice for so long and doing kind of straight up physical therapy that you shifted from traditional physical therapy and really did a deep dive into stress management, the effect that stress has on the body?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting when you think about the first part of my journey to physical therapy. It's almost like I came back full circle. Like sort of started with the cognitive piece and then ended up kind of coming back around to how is stress affecting my patients' bodies. What happened is I was practicing, and it was probably like 15, 17 years, somewhere in there into my practice. And I started realizing that my patients were getting better on my table, but they would go to their stressful lives. It didn't matter if it was at work or at home, in relationship, or maybe it was, taking care of elderly parents or whatever their stress was. It would negatively affect their progress in physical therapy. And it kind of felt like what I was doing was just putting a Band-Aid on the situation, and I wasn't really getting to the root of what was causing the inflammation in their
Mm.
body. And that's when I started looking into stress, because I knew it was something that was really affecting my patients, and started realizing how the inflammation was coming from the response to stress, that biological response. And as we know now, a lot of the diseases that we see that we are combating, whether it's, type 2 diabetes or dementia or heart disease, these are all stress related responses. And so with pain, it was very obvious to me that I needed to really get to the root of the problem, and that past trauma and stress was really an important component for me to be able to have the knowledge and to address. So it was born out of my frustration of
Mm.
not being able to help my patients. And of course, I too was going through stress, so I was frustrated with my own health journey. And
Yeah, I'm
that's
curious about that because I think our own journey also greatly influences, the path that we take with our clients. What were you experiencing personally that led you down this path too?
Yeah, well, I mentioned before I was having a lot of jaw pain when I was trying to be an actress, and that went away when I went to school. I really felt like the jaw pain was my need to control things. And I didn't feel like I could control my life in the acting world, in the thespian world, as one can't. And then with school, I kind of felt like a little bit more control. And so that jaw pain went away. The harder I studied, the better I did in class, generally. That wasn't
Right.
always the scenario, but generally. And so I felt like I had some more control. So that pain went away, but I was dealing with my own stress as a physical therapist. I had a young child. I come from a mother who's an immigrant who didn't really teach me how to manage stress. In fact, she taught me how to stress because that was how she got through life as an
Mm-hmm.
immigrant woman.
Yep.
And so I had that as my learning platform. And then I also, just life, financial stuff. I was dealing with a lot of neck pain and still am, but it's better now. But I was dealing with sort of recurrent insomnia and neck pain and moodiness and blowing up at my child and not really knowing how to stay regulated as a mom. And so all of those things are also what guided me, not just my patient's needs, but my own needs
Right.
to seek help and figure out this stress thing, unpack it, figure out how to manage it better.
Right. And you mentioned insomnia, and that's something that I've struggled with, I think with a tremendous amount of stress, especially going through school and all the years of that. And how did you like, cure your insomnia? Is it cured, or how are you dealing with it now?
Well, my insomnia got better and then got worse again. And the reason it got worse again is because I started going through perimenopause.
Mm.
So, as I started regulating my nervous system, I found that I did sleep better because I wasn't in survival mode, right? Like if you think about your nervous system being upticked, it's not in a place where it feels that sleep is safe.
Mm.
Right. So I learned how to talk to my nervous system. I call it body fluency. I learned how to talk to my nervous system and let it know that I was not in an emergency. Right. And that's how we get out of sympathetic nervous system or fight flight, as we're often calling it. And once I did that, I was able to sleep a lot better. And then along came perimenopause. Yay.
Yay! So fun.
Yeah.
The
And then
funnest
things got
times.
really crazy. And I thought, oh, all the things that were working for me before, now the rules have changed and they're no longer working. So that was another deep dive. That was more a deep dive into the sleep science than it was into the stress, because I had kind of already figured out the stress piece.
Mm.
But what I added to help me sleep as a perimenopausal and then menopausal woman was, going outside within 30 minutes of waking to get
Mhm.
sun on my face, and not direct sun necessarily, but just seeing sunlight.
Yes.
Um, I started not eating too late at night
Yep.
and not drinking alcohol. And those two things helped my heart rate go down. And then I was able to get back into deeper sleep.
Yes.
And for me, this isn't appropriate for every woman. So this is just my choice, but I am very sensitive to fluctuations in estrogen to the
Mhm.
point where it is detrimental to my mental health.
Yeah.
So I got on hormone replacement therapy, and that helped with a myriad of things. My brain fog, it helped with, although half the time you can't tell on this podcast. But no, it did. It helped. I was way worse before. And it
You
really
are never
helped.
foggy on our podcast.
I'm
You are
never foggy.
always on.
And it really helped with the insomnia piece.
Wow.
What was happening during menopause that was different than the insomnia I had before menopause, that I knew it wasn't entirely stress related and more hormonal, was that I'd be going in the early part of sleep, I'd be going into deep sleep and I would be jolted awake.
Wow.
And yeah, and that was how I knew that this was a menopause insomnia. And then there's also
Wow.
that 2 o'clock wake up, right? Which is cortisol. That's more stress related.
Mhm. Absolutely. You had mentioned like what you say to yourself when you're stressed. This was kind of before you talked about this part, this insomnia part. I think it's also, yes, we have to figure out what we say to ourselves, but it's also something that we need to do with our bodies. So give me a picture of how you started to manage your stress, not just with what you were saying to yourself, but what you were doing with your body.
Well, that's a huge, huge piece.
Mm-hmm.
So, stress fluency is your ability to understand the biological processes of a stress response, but also acknowledge and understand and notice the patterns in yourself and in your loved ones of how they respond to stress.
Mm.
And one of the key things for learning stress fluency and becoming more resilient is having better body fluency. And body fluency we is your ability to talk to. So when I was saying I'm talk to myself, my nervous system, I was actually talking to my body more than my
Mm.
brain in that
Mm-hmm.
instance. So talking to your body, and people get a little like weirded out, like, well, what in the how does one talk to the body, right? We know that we can talk to our brains. We do it all the time, but can we really talk to our body? Yeah, we can when we change the way we're breathing. Um,
Yes,
we are then having a conversation with our body, and then our body has that same conversation with the brain, right? And that's that brain body connection. um, the way that we are touched or touch ourselves, we know that there are alternating bilateral tactile cues that we can give our body to actually dampen what's happening in the amygdala up in the brain, in the fear center of the brain.
yes,
So what that is like, for example, if I cross my arms so that my right hand is touching my left shoulder and then left hand touching right shoulder, and I just alternate in little taps. And it
I
can be
love it.
squeezes. It doesn't have to be taps. Yeah, it can be squeezes or taps or whatever, even sweeping.
They call
So
it
any
butterfly technique.
that is the butterfly hug.
I love, yes,
Yes,
I
that
love
is an
it.
EMDR technique.
It
Yeah.
is.
And that
I
is
use it with
based
my
on
clients.
I love it. It's such a
Me
great,
too.
it's easy, and
Hmm.
that is based on the fact that this alternating bilateral, so both sides of the body touch, for some reason, we're not sure why, but for some reason, it calms the fear centers of the brain. And so that's going to help you rewire and get out of that survival mode.
Right. They say it activates the vagus nerve, which then basically turns on the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, the opposite of the sympathetic, or as I like to call it, the not so sympathetic nervous system.
That's
We
right.
want to be in parasympathetic nervous system state more so than not, because when you're in the sympathetic nervous system, that's when cortisol starts flowing, your adrenaline starts flowing. And if you're constantly in that state, it is very difficult for your health.
Yeah. And I just like to mention that you do want a little bit of sympathetic. I don't want listeners to think that we don't want any kind of sympathetic nervous system in our daily life.
Right.
Um, so you need a little bit of sympathetic. It's actually not such like, it's not the bad guy. It's just that what happens is we need a little bit for alertness, for
Mm-hmm.
focus, right? For motivation. It gives us a little bit of oomph to our muscles, blood flow, all of that good stuff. But what
Mm-hmm.
happens as humans is we tend to get stuck up too high in sympathetic arousal. And
Yes.
so it feels uncomfortable in our body. That's where the shakes can come in, and the moodiness and the irritability, and your heart rate's pumping too much and your breathing is now shallow and fast. So that is the type of sympathetic that you were alluding to that we don't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily want to be in. But really, on a daily basis, I move in and out of sympathetic, parasympathetic, and there's usually a lot of places where I am in both sympathetic and parasympathetic. For example, right now, I'm doing
Mm-hmm.
a podcast with my Supatra, and I need a little bit of oomph, right? I need a little bit
Mm-hmm.
of arousal. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot be in a place of total calm. but I'm also connecting with another human being and I need to be able to think clearly. So I do need a little bit of calm. So right now I'm floating right in between sympathetic and parasympathetic, and I'm holding both within my system. They're both on
Mhm.
right now, but one isn't overtaking the other. Now, if I was writing or doing art of some kind, I would need less sympathetic and more of the parasympathetic, right? So there's just always this flux and this continuum that we move around throughout the day. We might go up into high sympathetic and it might be appropriate. We get an email that makes us upset that we need to deal with, and it is a bit of an emergency, let's say a modern day emergency, right? And
Right.
so you might go up into sympathetic. The idea is not to get stuck up there for the rest of the day. You don't want that high sympathetic from the email to affect your interaction with your husband or your child
Mhm.
or a friend, right? So it's that flexibility of the nervous system that is what creates resilience.
I agree completely. And I think, when you see chronic long term stress, that's when you start to see a lot of mental and physical health issues, weight gain, difficulty concentrating, thinking, anxiety, depression. So, having some fluency, knowing when you need to be on and when you need to relax, and really moving between those two states can keep you the healthiest for sure. So, you talked about writing, and so I'm very interested in what was your main inspiration to write this wonderful best-selling book? What made you choose that route?
Hmm. I didn't think I was going to write a book. It wasn't on my radar. I had a couple people after I shared the information that I was learning on stress with them tell me that I should write a book, and it was helping my clients all this information and tools and techniques. And what I was finding is that people in the new age kind of space were talking about these body focused tools
Yes.
for improving your resilience. But it wasn't in the mainstream. And with my sort of sciencey physical therapy background, I felt like I probably had a good platform for helping people understand why the body techniques were going to help them with their cognitive mindset techniques.
Mhm.
And so that was kind of why I had a couple of people, all at sort of one period of time tell me I should write a book. And then I had a friend tell me that she was joining a book program where at the end of the year-long program, you would have a book written. And I thought, okay, the universe is aligning and wants me to write a book. So here we go.
Yay.
Yeah. And so I did. And it was a really fun, the writing of it was really fun, really.
Oh.
It was frustrating at times, of course, but I learned a lot about myself, and I learned a lot about stress, and um, it unfolded in such a way that I really felt like there were other forces helping me write. And just I feel like it's really what our planet needs right now is for everybody to kind of really get an understanding of what stress is, what it looks like in your loved ones, and what it looks like in yourself, so we can all stop feeling shame about it and start
Mhm.
finding better strategies.
Yes, I agree. So give us like two of, I think, your most favorite highlights of the book. Just two. Doesn't pick anything.
Oh, my favorite highlights. Um, I love the tools section. So I break down the tools into a breathing chapter, which you're in. I talk about your
Yes.
your breathing technique, right?
Yes.
And then I have a movement chapter, and I don't call it exercise because a lot of people who have pain cannot exercise per se, but we know that movement is really the important critical factor, not necessarily exercise. And then I have an eating chapter, which you're also in.
Yes.
Yes, a stretching chapter, and there's a chapter on mindfulness, on using your senses, your sense of
Yes.
vision and touch and hearing and smell. So let's see, what are my favorite highlights? Oh my gosh. This is a tough question.
Sorry.
One of, as a physical therapist, I deal with a lot of people who come to me and I got to teach them exercise. And there's a lot of past history of people not doing well with exercise. And what I love is the research that I did on how exercise releases the same hormones as stress.
Yes.
So there are sort of these mismatches that can occur where when you exercise, when you are already at your threshold for stress, you're already in survival mode, exercise can feel like stress because it's the same hormones and your body's never getting a break from those hormones. So people who have resistance to consistently exercising, when I point out to them, as I do in the book, that it could be that they're in survival mode and that maybe regulating their nervous system first before they start an exercise program will help them in the long run get to the gym on a consistent basis. And that again takes away that shame, like what's wrong with me that I can't
Yes.
exercise consistently. And so I love that piece of being able to bring that in. So that's probably a highlight. And then there's all the tools that I talk about. I talk about releasing the jaw because the cranial nerve that feeds the jaw is one of the nerves in what Stephen Porges calls your social engagement system. And Stephen Porges developed the polyvagal theory. And so
Yes.
he talks about these cranial nerves, not just the vagus nerve, but a couple of other nerves that feed this social engagement system and help you to be in a state of calm. And so I talk about doing a jaw release before you sit down for a meal. And that can sort of help increase saliva because you're calming the nervous system and can just overall help your nervous system calm down, which is going to help us digest better, right? That
Love
rest
it.
and digest. Yeah. So stuff like that can be, there's so many things in the book that I'm excited about.
It is a wonderful resource tool. I think, helping people normalize the fact that there's stress, taking away that shame and guilt about not performing at our best, because I think we're just conditioned to think we have to do everything perfectly. I think that resonates in the book as well. I can't believe this, Sean, but we're out of time,
What?
which is insane.
Oh,
But before
man.
we end this half and then you get to grill me with questions, tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you. What are your socials? What's your website? How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, thanks. As you mentioned earlier, I have a company called Body Insight. So you can find me at bodyinsight.com. And there you can look at how to work with me. I do one-on-one consultation, and I also have a ton of workshops coming up. I've got one in person in Pasadena in October, and I've got an online one that sort of guides you through my book step by step over 6 sessions. That's coming up in September, I believe. And I do that. I'll be doing some in 2025 as well. And then on Instagram, I'm at Body Insight Inc. And same place on Facebook at Body Insight Inc. And please, any listeners want to reach out to me, I am available via email through my website. I would love to hear from you all.
Yay! Well, we are blessed to have you not only as a guest, but as a co-host. We've just started this journey, but you are an incredible interviewer, an incredible friend, an incredible physical therapist, and I am so blessed and lucky to have you in my life. I am keeping you forever, so you can't ever go away from me. But we are very, very glad to have you on this episode of this podcast. Please stay tuned for the second half where Chantal gets to grill me.
Oh,
Thank you
grill
so
is a good
much.
word. That's a good word, grill. I'm going to
Yes.
grill you.
Let's do it. Okay. Thank you
Yeah.
all for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Body Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Body Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.